All right, it is 2 after, so let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another Chargebacks 911 webinar. I appreciate you all tuning in during your workday and hope everyone is having a productive week. I'm Justin Clements. I'm the Director of PR and Media Relations at Chargebacks 911. As always, I'm going to be your host for today's webinar. Today, we're going to be going over how merchants can capitalize on the holiday shopping this year, and more importantly, how can they protect those sales post-transaction. We're going to be diving into some of those high-risk industries, some of the marketing tactics that merchants are using this time of year, some of which may put you into a high-risk category with your payment processor. All of that we're going to dive into. Last year we saw that records were broken in terms of sales during this time of year, and this year is projected to be even higher. So now's the time to prepare for all that. So before we get started, just want to, as always, quickly go over how this webinar is structured. The first part of the webinar is going to include a short presentation. This portion will have some visual elements, so it's important that, if at all possible, you can close all the other windows that you have and give us your undivided attention. The second portion of the webinar will be a Q&A where we'll answer many of the questions that were submitted beforehand, as well as some that are submitted live. This portion will be a little less visual, so it's okay if you want to just listen in on that part. Now, during the webinar, feel free to submit any questions that you have. We promise that we'll get to those questions. If not live, we'll get to it by email afterwards. So if you have a question, go ahead and submit it. We promise to get back to you. All right. So today, I am lucky enough to be joined by a partner that we hold in really high regard here at Chargebacks 911. These folks are payment processing masters who can take some of these best practices that we're going to go over and really break them down from that processing standpoint, so merchants can understand what these practices intertwine with their payment processor and how to maintain a healthy merchant account. So joining us today is Kellen Rayner. He's the Vice President of Sales at Bankful. Kellen, thanks so much for joining us today. Just really quick, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and Bankful?
Yeah, Justin, thank you so much. Happy to be here. Like Justin said, my name is Kellen Rayner. I'm the VP of Sales over here at Bankful. We're a full-service PSP, payment service provider. We specialize in high risk. Our platform kind of adds, we provide a soup to nuts solution for the payment processing industry. Our gateway offers a comprehensive suite of services that include chargeback management, fraud tools, digital wallets, payment processing, subscriptions. Really here to kind of set you up to scale and convert those transactions.
Perfect. Well, we're really happy to have you on board here today, sort of taking us through some of this. So real quick, before we get into the weeds, I just kind of want to go over some stats and lay out the foundation from last year's holiday shopping season and what we can expect in this year's holiday shopping season. Always deemed the golden quarter for retailers, just because that's when everybody typically sees their spike in sales go on, typically from November 1st all the way through the end of December. So just taking a look at some of these stats, we see that consumers spent nearly $1 trillion during the holiday season last year, so $964 billion, and that's a 3.8% increase from 2022, and it set a record for most spent during that golden quarter. Looking particularly at online sales, the online holiday sales, they increased by nearly 5% to about $221 billion. With mobile shopping making up more than half of those online sales. Now that's really important because most of the chargebacks and post-transaction disputes happen with card not present transactions. So that's something to be mindful of, that we see that that's making up the majority of the sales, and probably as we look year over year, that's only going to increase. Another interesting fact that we saw is that Gen Z consumers spent 15% more in 2023 than they did the year previously, which is the largest percentage increase group. This is important because Gen Z uses mobile banking apps far more than any of the other age groups that are sort of in the that are making these purchases. So if we're looking at chargebacks, and if you're a merchant trying to avoid chargebacks and instead have consumers go through refunds for you, or getting refunds through you, it's important to look at this age demographic, because these are the ones who are doing, the the one-click mobile app disputes with their banks. They feel much more comfortable going through them due to understanding and convenience. So it's important that not only this year, but moving forward, keeping an eye on this age group as they kind of, as they become more involved in the purchasing cycle. So it's always good to look at. And looking ahead at this year, we see that U.S. holiday retail, specifically for e-commerce sales, are expected to break records again this year, reaching 271.5 billion. And that's going to be a 9.5% increase from 2023. So just giving you the groundwork of what we saw last year, what to expect this year, and these year-over-year trends are probably going to continue.
Yeah, very exciting.
Oh, can you hear me, Kellen?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, I thought you were saying something. So real quick before diving in too much, we wanted to take a look at high risk industries. The reason why we want to look at these particular sectors is because these companies that operate within these fields, they often see chargebacks at higher rates than they do for other ones. So just kind of looking at what these industries entail. These are folks who need to be kind of doing that proactive work even more so than your typical retailer or merchant. Everybody should be running and managing and looking at chargebacks, especially those of friendly fraud, but these industries in particular. So we see those companies that are heavily reliant on recurring payments, subscription services, anything that offers free trial services. Those that use affiliate marketing or drop shipping, those where you kind of have elements of your business that are in third parties' hands. Sometimes miscommunication can happen, products arrive that aren't as described, those sorts of things. Nutraceutical and cosmetic companies, telemarketing, calling cards. We see casinos, gambling, gaming, especially for those who place losing bets. So we can see that. The pharmaceutical industries, online drug providers, adult entertainment, dating services, and then we see the travel industries, which I saw we had some pre-submitted questions from a few of those in the travel and hospitality industries, which we'll tackle later on. Kellen, from the payment processing standpoint, can you kind of take us in? Is there anything we left off this list, or is there any of these industries on this list that are especially susceptible to disputes, to chargebacks? You can weigh in on that.
I mean, it's probably the most common question that we get from a merchant is, why am I being classified as high risk, especially if you're not in any of these particular industries? And really the short answer is the banks are really the ones, the underwriting departments at the banks are the ones who really determine what they consider high risk, and every single bank is going to calculate that differently. But the most common thing that they have is there's three types of risk that they all share. One is equity risk, the second's reputational risk, and the three is regulatory risk. Now, I think any vertical can really be classified in an equity risk standpoint, and a lot of those are small market businesses that don't have a lot of liquidity in the bank, but the bank's just afraid that they're not going to be able to collect on any chargebacks, maybe not get the fees. Reputational has to do a lot with what you see over here, adult industry specific. It's like the banks are worried about the moral concern associated with it. Firearms, people are, they are worried about gun violence, CBD's association with drug use, and gambling, like you said. Nobody likes to lose, so why not charge that back as a tactic? So it's a very common question, and it's a case-by-case basis per each bank. So finding the right partner that can educate you on how to get that account approved, kind of what the landscape looks like, is the best practice to have a really good understanding of what high risk is and how it functions and how you can play in that field successfully.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you for that. And then, those three categories are especially important. A lot of people are aware of the financial fallout from even like disputes and chargebacks, but there's obviously that reputational damage. And then, if you're not CPI compliant, there's consequences of that too.
And the regulatory issue, I mean, the fines, there's a lot of industries like CBD that are beholden to the the 0.3% THC threshold. Exceeding that can you can get some fines there. So it's a wide variety. So it is a case by case basis, and like I said, just each bank is going to calculate their risk just a little bit differently.
No, that's a great point. So kind of looking into these businesses, because obviously banks and PSPs, they have their own sets of standards as far as what constitutes being high risk. So we can see that for the most part, those businesses that use impression-based advertising, lead-based advertising, the pay per action, outbound calling, or upselling tactics. We can see from our history of working with merchants that they can be more susceptible to post-transaction disputes. But Kellen, can you kind of tell us what some of the merchant characteristics that Bankful considers high risk?
Yeah, I mean, the CBD category is definitely a high risk threshold just because of its association with marijuana. Online firearms is definitely a big category that we see a lot of. High volume, high ticket. You're selling an expensive item, or you're not selling a lot, and then all of a sudden you run a really high transaction. Those are red flags. And we see a lot of online electronics, online smoke shops. A lot of wineries, are shipping product. Alcohol, tobacco are a lot of industries that we see, coming through our door, every day.
Yeah, and even some of those, even outside of like the industry that you might work in, a lot of it can come down to the tactics that you use that could even place you into a high risk category. So some of those, again, those different marketing tactics that we were talking about, if you use affiliate marketing, that's one where if you're going through that third party and they might misrepresent a product, it gets delivered, oh, it's not as advertised. Well, there's a reason code for that could constitute a chargeback. So some of those high risk tactics, if you use an online call center, if you're doing, if you're paying for sales leads, those sorts of things, that's gonna bring a little bit more risk when it comes to reaching out. In terms of high risk tactics, different operating procedures that they have. Kellen, is there anything that you would recommend, especially this time of year when sales are really high? Is there anything that high risk merchants should do differently, or are there any precautions that they might take in order to avoid that if they're using some of these tactics?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's trying to make a sale, right? And you always are trying to make your product sound as great as it is. You want to sell product that is as good as advertising. And I think with CBD specifically, you see, a little sometimes misleading marketing tactics. You're going to say that this elbow cream is going to solve your arthritis. And although it may for a lot of particular merchants, it may not for others. So there are people that will charge back because the product that you sold them that said, hey, this is good for sleeping, or this is good for pain relief, it may not work for them. And because you're advertising, it turns out to be a too good to be true offer, and that can lead to significant amount of chargebacks. And when you're trying to capitalize on the holiday season and people are looking for stocking stuffers, or they're looking for fun things like that, you really see a lot of the CBD market, those processing transactions increase. Another thing that we see happen, which we'll touch base a little bit later, are in subscriptions. So you have a subscription offering, you have a client, a customer that's looking at that purchase and doesn't realize that they've opted into the subscriptions. So being mindful of that is super important, and having a really good customer service department is really going to help that. But reauthorizing billing without clear authorization is definitely what can lead to that. And then outside of that, shipping, delivering delays, and is what we see most common.
Yeah, and especially for the subscription-based services, letting the customer know up front, even if they're purchasing a product that might enroll them into a subscription, you got to be very clear on that. Otherwise, you're going to be losing your product, and you're going to get charged back on that, especially if
it's really expensive. But
Yeah,
it's a great
right.
product to have. But just, being mindful of the product and the power that it has behind it will protect
Mhm.
you, your business, and allow you to keep going and keep that processing healthy and thrive.
Right. All right, so Kellen, I know you got this is definitely in your realm. I'm curious as to how, for those merchants that are on the call, how can high risk industries, how can they get approved for payment processing if they use some of the tactics that we just went over, or if they fall into one of those industries that we just named?
Right. First and foremost, partnerships are everything, right? You can't really succeed and have a long, lengthy, healthy business without the right partners in place, right?
Hmm.
So it makes a huge difference. So finding a well-established, trusted payment processor is super important because they will help you, small market, startup, enterprise merchants. It's a very different landscape. It behaves very differently than a brick and mortar business would. And then it's also the same in regarding to a brick and mortar business, but partnerships are everything. So make sure you do your research, and you find someone that you can trust, right?
Hmm.
Second, like I said at the beginning of the call, every bank is going to calculate risk differently. So when you partner up with somebody that has a lot of options, they can, help you get there. So because banks calculate risk differently, they're going to have, underwriting requests. And it's important to be malleable to those requests because this is a new relationship for you. It's a new relationship for the bank. And all relationships develop with trust levels, right? So just
Hmm.
because there's an underwriting ask at the beginning doesn't mean it will always be there. And if you have a trusted partner, they can help you alleviate those asks as your business goes on. But being very malleable to those requests is definitely a great way to get you that processing. Um,
Hmm.
Compliant. When you're dealing with high risk, whether you're a firearms merchant, an adult industry, you're in CBD, there are all these different thresholds or check marks that you have to cover. You can't exceed 0.3%. It's some with
Hmm.
banks, you have to have tobacco and firearms license to sell those products. So making sure that your website's compliant, and your products are compliant with those regular with the rules is definitely important because they may ask you to remove products. You just want to be buttoned up when you get there, and then the payment
Hmm.
your payment service provider will help you. We'll vet your website. We'll have a good conversation. We'll say, hey, this we might need to remove this, or I think this looks good, so on and so forth. But it's a good to be buttoned up in that regard.
Hmm.
And then strong customer relationships. If you're looking for, if you're wanting to see what market rates like, you've been processing payments for an extremely long time. You may be in firearms, you may be in CBD. Banks are going to look at your reviews. They're going to see what your BBB ratings like. They're going to see what your Google ratings like, Yelp, so on and so forth. So
Hmm.
having a strong customer service department, having testimonials and great reviews definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know that that can be a struggle for merchants sometimes, but yeah, if you can find folks to give you a good review,
Right.
and people talking about your product, that's gonna add to the your legitimacy because nothing resonates better with other consumers than consumer testimonials. So no, that's a great point. Kind of looking into some of the alternative payment methods that we see gaining in popularity, especially over the last year. The biggest one that we see that merchants have adopted based off of what consumers are using most is digital wallets. So we definitely wanted to dedicate some time in this webinar to kind of going over digital wallets specifically, and some of the benefits behind those, how they can increase those conversions. So we want to just dive in just a little bit. So if you are a merchant and you're doing business, through e-commerce, you're doing it online. Digital wallets are very big right now, especially for their added security and their use of tokenization. So it's something that both from a security and convenience standpoint, a lot of merchants are adopting. Just some of the benefits that we see: faster checkout processes. Not having to put all your card information each time you make a purchase, especially if you're going to different stores this holiday season. Something that consumers look to use more and more. Increased trust and security. Again, the using those the encryption and tokenization that they have makes that transaction more secure. It's going to make customers feel comfortable shopping with you. They see that you're adopting new technology that they're more prone to use. The mobile optimization, we do see more and more folks shopping through their phones. So having that, those wallets through the apps on their phone, it's going to make so you have less abandoned carts if they can, just a couple clicks on their phone from completing that checkout process. We see reduced payment errors. With that stored information, we see that they're less likely to put in the wrong expiration date or the security code on their card. Again, all that ease of shortening that time that they spend at checkout, and the fact that they support multiple payment options. So if for some reason a card gets declined because of insufficient funds, or a transaction is recognized, or the bank might flag it, using those digital wallets, they can pull out another card just as quickly, just as easily, and use it for that. Kellen, from your standpoint, from the folks that you work with, is digital wallets, is that the new wave? Is it something that merchants are going to be looking to implement more and more, like we're seeing from our surveys? Can you shed a little light on that?
It's a big ask. It's probably, outside of why am I classified as high risk, is do you have digital wallets available? Because of the ease of use, right? Mm-hmm. Everything is done on a digital device these days. It improves the customer experience. There's a global reach aspect to it that, it makes it easier to process transactions if you're marketing into different countries, and it's fast, and it takes away a lot of the, like you said, having to go find that other card. Oh, my wallet's in the other room. I got to go walk over there. You might abandon that card and go do something else. But with the fact that you have that digital wallet and those multiple payment options inside of your cell phone or connected to your computer, makes it easy to finish that transaction.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I was kind of going over some of the different alternative payment methods that we see increasing in popularity. Now, this is based off of our merchant survey that we did for this year, and that report will be coming out here shortly. You can find that through our website. But just taking a look at some of the alternative payment methods that we see, obviously the one that's most adopted, we can see, is e-wallets. We did see, based off of those that we surveyed, that it had gone down by 1%. But there could be a sample bias in that, depending on the merchants that we surveyed. But you can kind of see sort of the adoption level of some of these. We do see more folks using QR codes. We do see more merchants who are adopting peer-to-peer payments. Actually, that was the biggest increase that we saw. Only just under a quarter of merchants have adopted it. There are some consumer protection gaps that we see with those, but as those get patched up and make those more beneficial to consumers, we're going to see those consumers use that more and more. If they use that more, we're going to see merchants adopt those. So we just kind of want to give a snapshot of some of these different elements. We do see crypto being accepted more, but again, a very small portion of merchants are accepting that at the time being. But that's also one to keep your eye on. But currently, right now, in terms of alternative payment methods to card and cash, e-wallet seems to be the biggest one that merchants are bringing on based off of what consumers want to use. Kellen, for you, are there any of these alternative payment methods in here that kind of stand out to you, or is there any that we don't have on here that we need to keep our eye out for?
E-wallets and peer-to-peer payments are really huge. You see a lot more street vendors these days adopting that, who once were cash only businesses. You go to the beach, you can sit in your chair and have 20 business people walk by you in the course of 3 hours, all accepting Zelle, QR codes, and all those types of forms of payments. So it's definitely it's a great thing, because it's allowing more. I think having as many payment options at your disposal is going to make you a successful business person. And some people don't feel comfortable bringing cash. Some people want to just have their phone with them and they can make that payment, leave their wallet in the cars. There's a security thing for the consumer, and being able to be malleable to their spending habits, no matter where you are, is really important.
Yeah, and kind of touching on that, like consumer safety and everything like that. I know the merchants that we surveyed, I think about a quarter of them that we surveyed perceived like bringing on alternative payment methods into their operating systems open them up to more risk. Is there a particular payment method that you see that might open them up to risk, or is that something where that might just be in the mind of the merchant of sort of stepping into something new, especially these that are like just emerging and becoming popular?
Yeah, I just think you got to know your business, right? And I think when you're processing payments online, there are thresholds of risk there. And anytime you process that transaction, no matter if it's from a digital wallet or a traditional bank card, the consumer on the other side could still charge that back.
Hmm.
I don't think that you're exposing yourself to more risk in that regard. Anytime you increase your transactions, you're essentially exposing yourself to risk.
Hmm.
But that's why it's super important to have good customer service, a product that's delivered as it's received. You're behind your product. It's really good. And if you want to be a little bit more risk averse, a popular alternate payment method that we offer is electronic check processing. That takes it off the Visa MasterCard rails. So if you're looking at more of a high ticket type of transaction, we can process a check for you electronically. You can wait until those funds are deposited into your account before you ship that product, and you can treat that transaction very differently. You have the dialogue with the customer, and you say, hey, I feel more comfortable processing it this way. It's much more secure for both of our ends. And then I'll send this to you certified mail, and you'll be there to sign it off. So there are some additional ways that you can mitigate that risk. It's just when you open yourself to more processing transactions, your risk exposure goes up. So it's good to have good partners, and it's good to have good fraud technology, good chargeback technology, and then other options available to make you feel better as a business owner.
No, agreed. Yeah. All right, so kind of getting into that, the fraud protection, being proactive. What do you need to look out for? How do you protect yourself? There are some things that you're going to want to take into account for this holiday season. I mean, even beyond that, you should be doing this throughout the year. But again, we're about to hit that season of spikes and transactions. These are just some common best practices that if you're not already adopting, which I'm sure the merchants are on the call today, you guys have implemented some, if not all of these in some fashion, but we just kind of want to go over these just to hit on them. So you definitely want to monitor your transactions for any red flags. In particular, you want to be looking at large orders. As you know, if this is a fraudulent transaction, or even one that is going to be an instance of friendly fraud, they're going to be doing those on high ticket items, and large orders like that. Any mismatched billing and shipping addresses, unusual activity of that sort. If you see that the IP address isn't matching, where the shipping is going to, those things to look out for. You definitely want to make sure that you have fraud prevention tools in place. AVS, security code on the card checks, 3D secure authentication. Those things are going to be huge in terms of having those fraud filters set up in place, especially if you're handling these things internally. Being able to take a look at that in real time and have those flags alert you to some of those transactions that might have suspicious behaviors about them. That's something that you want to do, and more importantly, making sure that your fraud filters are accurate. Another thing that we see, especially this time of year, really when those fraud filters have settings on them, sometimes that results in false declines, or when you're turning down legitimate transactions because they appear to be fraud. So you want to make sure that those fraud filters are weaning out the bad but letting in the good. You don't want them so strict that they're turning down valid transactions. As we mentioned before, you want to make sure that you're PCI compliant, that you're meeting those industry standards, you're handling the secure payment information in a way that's compliant with regulators. It's tough to keep up with all the new rules and regulations that come out. It seems like every few months we get some sort of update either from the card networks or from regulatory bodies about how to handle these sort of things. So just making sure you're up to speed on those industry changes. It can be daunting. It can be a lot, especially if you're you're working with a smaller team or with fewer resources, but something you definitely want to be in tune with. Again, using that real-time fraud detection as well. That's where we see a lot of AI and machine learning. That's where those tools can be leveraged. Again, it's got to work off the system that you put into place, so making sure that's accurate. But having something that can aggregate all that data, look through it, and point out any red flags, that's huge. One thing from Chargebacks 911 standpoint is alerts. If anybody has dealt with chargebacks and gone through the representment process, you know that even after you receive that chargeback, if you go through the representment process, you get that chargeback overturned. It is a legitimate transaction. You still have to pay that chargeback fee. You still get that ding on your merchant account. So one thing that kind of helps avoid chargebacks altogether is setting up chargeback alerts. So you'll get notified if a dispute is raised with the issuing bank. If it's something where it's the merchant error, you can go ahead and resolve that dispute yourself. You can offer a refund, in-store credit, those sorts of things. So it's just a great way to avoid the reputational damage, the fees and penalties, and hurting that reputation with your merchant account. And then also looking to verify any suspicious orders. So contacting the customers directly, confirming that they want to purchase, a large amount or a high ticket item, those sorts of things. Now, Kellen, for in terms of like the preemptive measures that merchants can take, what else can you tell us about how merchants can better protect themselves ahead of time before the problem arises?
Yeah, I mean, just be mindful of the trends. So, and participating in webinars like this and being a part of forums on LinkedIn about the payment landscape and where it's going, where it's trending. Digital wallets have really changed the landscape of how payment processing works. We've experienced in the past, you don't want to mess with your conversions. So what we've experienced in the past in the rise of digital wallets, a previously popular fraud tool rule was IP address, like you had mentioned earlier today. It's like, hey, I don't want to approve a transaction for a transaction where the IP address is 150 miles away from the delivery address. But with the rise of digital wallets, I can make that payment for that product while I'm in Hawaii or while I'm somewhere else. I'd like to do a lot of vacation purchasing on my phone or on my iPad. So you're setting yourself up for false declines. Now, how would you know that if you're not understanding on a webinar like this, where digital wallet transactions are up so high, Gen Zs are adopting it, they're getting older, they're getting jobs, they're making more money, that transactional volume is only going to go up. And to Justin's point earlier today, they're going directly to their banks to refute those transactions. And sometimes maybe the bank will say, hey, this is out of your normal purchasing pattern, right? We'll charge this back for you. So being very mindful of what those filters are. You don't want to mess with your conversions. You want to process those payments, and you just want to be prepared to handle those, whatever arises, effectively.
And it's a great point that you mentioned about, sort of joining webinars in the online community. We do see, and we're so glad to see it, that more businesses and entities throughout the payment process, right? So your card networks, your regulators, issuing banks, we're seeing a lot more of them talk to one another, which is something that we've been advocating for a while, especially in terms of fighting friendly fraud and helping balance that scale for merchants. So I'm really glad you brought up that point of joining these forums and sort of see what's being laid out there, because as an industry, everybody's just trying to protect honest transactions, and we're starting to see more of that collaboration. So
right,
I'm glad you brought that point up.
is super crucial. And once we stop communicating with each other, we find ourselves in all of these different precarious types of situations. So effective education will definitely it goes a long way.
Now, kind of diving in, Kellen, I want you to kind of take us through the role of the processor and specifically with fraud prevention. I know our services help out with that, but really, if you're a merchant and you've got your payment processor, they are a tool. They are kind of an added level of security, if you will, more so than just a service that they're providing for you. So I was hoping, from Bankful standpoint, if you can kind of take us a little bit of a dive into what your guys' role is with fraud prevention.
Yeah, every PSP is going to behave a little bit differently, right? But I could tell you from what we do with our customer base, if we'll follow your transactional patterns, right? So we'll notice that, you're selling $25,000 a month at an average ticket size of 35 bucks. And that's historically what you look like. And during the peak holiday seasons, you're going to have a 35-40% increase, so on and so forth. But if we notice that all of a sudden you ran a $1,500 transaction and that seems to be quite abnormal, we could stop that transaction for you. We can hold on to that transaction, notify you, hey, this is a high ticket. Have you looked into this? Are you familiar with this customer? So on and so forth. So that's one add value have. It's important to be able to call somebody. Say, hey, Kellen, I have a problem. How can you help me? And we'll help you. You're not going into a dialer when you call us. Education, best practices. We've been in this industry for a long time. We've seen a lot of behavioral changes. We've seen technology changes. So that where it comes to the partnership. It's like, how can I learn more about this landscape? So we are big on education. And then we offer digital wallets, like I said earlier, that has its own level of security because of the tokenization of the credit card information. There's biometric technology that's behind that sometimes. So even to complete that purchase on your phone, you need the face recognition there, which is super important and make you as a business owner more comfortable. And then, the tools that we can provide. We have a lot of AI technology embedded in our platform to help you make those decisions and in real time and flag any abnormalities. So having a partner that is going to where the puck is super important because it makes all the difference.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's that added level of support. They are your partner in more ways than just providing you with a service. So definitely see them as a useful resource. Kind of wanted to get into the realm of friendly fraud, right? So this can kind of constitute chargeback abuse or misuse. There are a lot of different categories that can fall under friendly fraud for when those disputes and those chargebacks arise. Unfortunately, for merchants today, you are competing with the issuing bank for convenience. We did a cardholder survey back earlier this year called the Cardholder Dispute Index, where we see that a lot of these cardholders are going straight to their bank without contacting the merchant, and they're doing so because it's convenient. Their bank is more understanding and empathetic. They get results right away. Sometimes they get a refund same day, if not within a few business days. The vast majority of the time. So it's something that it's tough to keep up with in terms of being the first step in a dispute for a cardholder, because we see today that they're contacting the bank. So being able to detect friendly fraud and when that's happening is huge. So if you're a merchant taking it upon yourself, one thing you want to do is you want to review chargeback reason codes. You want to get to know them in general, and different card networks have different reason codes, but you want to be up to speed on what those reason codes are. And then when those disputes come in, you want to be able to see what's the reason code that it's filed under, and you want to go back and take a look at like the customer history as well. You want to see if this is a repeat customer that's had a one-off bad experience. Did they get something that wasn't as advertised? Those sorts. Getting that knowledge of what those reason codes entail and being able to see when they come in, is this going to be more of an instance of friendly fraud, or if it's not. Another thing is looking at those discrepancies in communication, right? So if you're noticing that these complaints are inconsistent, if you see that you're getting a complaint about a particular product that really doesn't associate with the product at all, this wasn't the type of product that I wanted in this category, but that's the only kind that you offer. Those sorts of things where if you know your product and you know your processes, that's something where some of those red flags can be very apparent. And again, just understanding what those reason codes are and where they're coming in at. Not only that, but if it is something where it's on the merchant side, you can also use that to optimize some of your business practices. If it's something where you've experienced a delay in shipping, or delivery doesn't go well, and you have a run with whoever your partner is for delivering those packages is slow or delaying, sometimes chargebacks can arise from there. So being able to find out and clearly communicating with your customers when there's going to be a shipping delay, when they can expect their packages, that's going to help sort of deter that, because just because a product is delayed doesn't necessarily mean that the cardholder has a right to get their money back straight away, or that's a disputable charge. Another thing to look at is those behavioral red flags. So we kind of touched on this a few times, but those high value purchases, unfamiliar or unusual activity. This is where you're going back and looking at the shipping and the billing address. How different are they? Those sorts of things. So you want to be able to take a look at friendly fraud from that standpoint. So you already know your business, but now being able to see from a dispute standpoint what's something that's affiliated with your business and what's something that doesn't, and might be a case of an illegitimate chargeback.
Right.
So that's sort of some of the things to look at to detect that friendly fraud. Now going into preventing that friendly fraud. And Kellen, I'd love to hear what you think about this as we go through them. So one huge thing is having clear and detailed descriptions. One, for your product, you want to make sure that you provide dimensions for your product. I'm sure we all ordered something off of Amazon that we thought was one size and it comes in either much smaller or bigger. You want to be clear with your product descriptions. That way, that is not a reason code that can be filed for that. You want to be clear upfront about what it is that they're buying. Another big one, and this is something that it doesn't take much effort but could prevent a lot of chargebacks, is being able to update your billing descriptor so it's recognizable and relates to your business. One of the things that we see when we surveyed those card holders, we saw that the leading cause of friendly fraud and chargeback misuse was cardholders not recognizing the billing descriptor on their statement. Now, while some of those may have been instances of fraud, their card information got stolen, something was bought without their approval, that could happen. But a lot of those are coming from, they bought something from a store, the merchant isn't up to speed with what their billing descriptor looks like, or they don't know how to change it. So they see something that comes in and it might be a phone number. It could be something where it's not the name that they're doing business under. They see that, they don't recognize that charge, and then they immediately call their bank. This is something where if you just contact your merchant account rep, something to take a look at that billing descriptor and change it to something that's recognizable with your storefront, it's something that's going to alleviate chargebacks, especially if you're getting a lot of those for legitimate purposes where you can't find any other reason than they don't recognize the transaction.
I think that's a big one. I mean, the billing descriptors can eliminate a lot of chargebacks. We talk about this a lot when we're on the phone with our merchants. We were seeing this a lot with sole proprietors. They would have their names as the billing descriptor. When you're going through your bank app and you're like, oh, what's this Kellen Rayner? And you don't even need to call your bank sometimes. You can just go into that transaction and refute it right there in your app and have a chargeback in seconds. So that's probably the big one. Obviously, selling your product, delivering it as it is advertised is definitely a very important thing. If you're selling clothing, it's really important to have your size dimensions on your website. Just detail. Remind your customer and let them know what they're getting, who are they getting it from, when it's going to be delivered.
Yeah, and even for billing descriptors, depending on the length of your name, it might be a good idea to even put the phone number for your customer service line in that billing descriptor. That way, there's their call to action right there, as opposed to a couple clicks of disputing the charge with their bank. They could just see that phone number and give you a call instead. So something to think about. Something else for preventative measures, having a responsive and understanding customer support. We already hit on, you are competing with issuing banks for convenience. It is much easier for the cardholder to call their bank and get that refund in their account, either instantaneously or the next day. So you want to make sure that you are making yourself as available as possible. So having that proactive support, sending post-purchase follow-up emails. You want to confirm that they're satisfied with the product. Having that easy access to customer service. This is something where machine learning really helps. If you can incorporate some sort of customer service bot, so somebody's already always responding and filing any sort of dispute before they can contact the bank. You just want to make yourself available at all times. You can't necessarily have an employee on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but that's where some of these machine learning tools really help. And also having those refund policies, having them not be so strict that it leaves the cardholder with no other option than contacting their issuing bank. You want to have friendly refund policies. You want to make it so that they come back to you and don't just keep the product and get the money back, and then you're left with those fees and penalties and everything like that. So you want to make sure that your refund policies are also empathetic to the cardholder.
Right. I think we all want to be treated, the same way. I mean, we're consumers as much as we are business folks, right? Mm-hmm. So when I look at my buying behavior, I like to purchase from companies that will, be malleable to certain things. Obviously, I'm not going to go back and return everything, but friendly refund policies. I think we compete a lot against big brands, right? Costco, Nordstrom's all have really, really big refund policies. And every time we encounter a merchant that does not have one, it's important to say, understand the reasons why. And not everything is products goods sold. Some of it might be, seminars, or they might be, like coaching and stuff like that. So, having some form of conversation of, hey, this wasn't exactly what I was getting, that dialogue is important. So it's always important to make sure that they're calling you first, because and then that having really good support in general, right? Because I think in any aspect, we can only support the weight that we can hold. So having if you can have 1, 2, 3 people able to help you with these claims, especially in the holiday season when your transactions are going to increase so much.
Right. The next phase of that, right after the transaction happens, when that product goes out the door, right? So the shipping and delivery verification. A lot of times we see for reason codes for chargebacks that come in as product not delivered. This is where, especially if this is a case of chargeback abuse, chargeback fraud, as it can be referred to sometimes. This is something where having that delivery partner, having that proof of delivery, so using those tracking numbers, getting the signature upon delivery, those sort of things, photo evidence. If Amazon or UPS, USPS, if they're delivering it and you require them to take a photo of the package being dropped off, all these things can be used in the representment process. If a chargeback is filed, you can submit that as compelling evidence, and that's something that might help get that dispute overturned. That might get that chargeback overturned in your favor. So being able to have the proof that something was delivered, here it is on their front doorstep, or here's their signature signing off for it. This is something that that will go a long way if you receive a chargeback, that that was delivered, everything went through correctly, and that's something that you can use to submit.
Right. Proof of delivery is a great log. Having signature upon delivery, depending on how much the consumer is buying. I mean, it's all evidence that will help you be successful in any chargeback you're trying to fight.
And the last thing, and we touched on it a little bit, but utilizing chargeback alerts and management. So again, those chargeback alerts, like we said, those when that chargeback happens, you pay the fee, you get the ding on your merchant account, and neither of those are reversible, even if it comes to light that it was a fraudulent chargeback. So it's something where you set up that alert, you can avoid that from the get-go, especially if it's something that's on the merchant side, or if you see that it comes through and you're like, no, we have all the evidence that shows that this is that this was a legitimate transaction. It at least helps you prepare, because sometimes those turnaround times, the window for the merchant to respond to a chargeback, they can be pretty short depending on the card network that it's going through. So kind of getting a heads up to, okay, here's a dispute that's coming down the pike. It helps you prepare. And then also, you having chargeback management, having a service or some sort of software in place for that can help you during the representment process. We kind of went over how these rules and regulations, they change all the time. At least twice a year are there major card updates, or there are new systems in place. We saw Visa institute compelling evidence 3.0. MasterCard is about to roll something out to a similar regard. But these things happen all the time. And if you're focused on business development, it's tough to keep up with all those rules and regulations. So if you do decide to go with like a third party or using a platform that's monitored by chargeback experts, it's something where you can sort of take the responsibility and everything that you need to do to stay on top of the payments and card industry. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of resources. Putting that into the hands of somebody who does it every day and whose whole purpose in their professional life is keeping up with these rules and regulatory changes and making sure that the system that merchant is operating through is up to date and compliant. It's something that can take a lot of weight off. It all depends on what your transaction volume is or what your chargeback rate is, as to whether or not you might need it. But if it's something that's sort of getting out of hand, or you're falling behind in the new processes that these card networks are implementing, it's something to keep in mind and to take a look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best way to handle any type of situation, to avoid panic, is being well prepared, having the documentation. You have a brick and mortar store, you're going to have an alarm system set up to prevent you from break-ins, right? You're going to have an e-commerce store, you should have alerts set up so you can act in real time. In case you need to pull back a delivery, call the carrier and say, hey, I need to pull this back, I got a chargeback, whatever the case may be. It's all about having time to prepare, being alerted when things arise, so you can have the time to behave and act in a way where you can handle these things efficiently.
Right. All right, so I know there's a lot to take in, but one thing we wanted to move on to, and we'll try to get through these quickly. I know we have 7 minutes left to the top of the hour. We want to get to questions, but we do want to dive into subscriptions, a high-risk feature for folks. We do see that can result in chargebacks sometimes, but we do kind of want to look at how businesses can sort of use these during the holiday sales to help drive revenue. If you look around the businesses, a lot of them are implementing some sort of membership or subscription program. We see it everything from Target to Walmart to, I think, even Panera Bread has some sort of membership or subscription-based service that you can go with. But here's some ways that it can help drive some of those sales during the holidays. If you have some holiday themed subscription offers where you can provide things like limited time discounts, the gift subscriptions, bundled products, things that are just exclusive to subscribers, that's something where not only can you get those folks sort of in touch with your newsletters and continuous outreach, but it's something that can help drive repeat customers if they're on with you. One of the things with that too is auto renewing features. It can, especially if they're updated on, when these recurring billing cycles are happening, it's something that you can plan for revenue in the months to come based off of your subscription. So as opposed to finding, new sales or getting those repeat customers to come back, this is something where you can kind of get them in on a program where you can reach out, you can continue to communicate with them, you can have that steady revenue stream over time. And another thing that's really big right now is people look for these subscription programs for their loyalty and rewards that they have. So offering free shipping on, if you spend X amount on a particular order, giving them early access to sales, letting them cash in rewards points for discounts, those sorts of things. That's something that's going to really help drive engagement. And if somebody's looking for a particular product that you offer, if they have a subscription with you, they're going to go to you first. So you kind of have that first priority over those customers, depending on what you're dealing with, what goods and services that you're selling. Kellen, is there any other way, especially for looking at this holiday season, what are some of these subscriptions and how can we utilize those?
Yeah, I mean, I think subscriptions are great. I mean, getting repeat business in the e-commerce world is tough. So having a good subscription
Hmm.
partner, having a good subscription offering is extremely important. Choosing the right
Hmm.
partner is also important because that could be an expensive thing. You want to capitalize on the additional, the revenue, but you don't want to go severely out of pocket by choosing an expensive partner. So vetting that process and understanding what the expense can look like. But it's a great, I
Hmm.
mean, Forbes wrote an article about it, I think last year, talking about how big the subscription industry is getting in a whole. So customer
Hmm.
retention, it's big for that. And if you got a great quality product, you could suggestively sell items that match their buying behaviors.
Hmm.
So, we're really big on subscriptions here at Bankful. We have a wonderful offering for the various e-commerce platforms that are out there. And I think it's a great feature and one that a lot of us should try to understand how to adopt in some way.
Hmm. Agreed. So kind of diving into the pros and cons a little bit of adopting those subscriptions. So, again, we kind of talked about those predictable revenue streams. You get that increased customer retention if they're paying for a subscription for your goods and services. They're going to go to you first to take advantage of that subscription that they have. Deeper customer relationships. You can see for who has these subscriptions what they're purchasing, what their purchasing history is. If you do have a product that's coming out, that you can see the folks in that subscription database who that would pertain to. Maybe you can do some targeted ads toward them. So it kind of gives you a deeper sense of who your customer base is. And then obviously higher average order value. We do see that subscriptions encourage customers to invest a little bit more. They spend a little bit more in a given transaction. Based off of having that subscription services. Kellen, any pros that I'm leaving off this list? I know you deal with subscriptions a lot, and I'm sure this doesn't even kind of encapsulate the pros that come with it. But anything that I'm missing on here?
Yeah, I mean, it increases your brand value. You start building up a robust subscription portfolio, your business, is more valuable at that point. So if you ever think about reselling down the road, you could resell a ton of those subscriptions.
Hmm.
So if you're looking more long term and where you could go, I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest pros
Hmm.
is adding value to your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that repeat and those loyal customers too. Yeah, no,
Yeah, and then
absolutely.
just knowing what you're going to get in certain times, and then capitalizing on that buyer behavior. If you have a new product, you have the opportunity to suggestively sell that new product. If you're in pet food, or you're in fragrance, or you're in CBD, whatever the case may be, you're giving yourself the opportunity to speak to somebody. You have a customer that's in your ecosystem that's allowing you to communicate with them on whatever cadence they desire, and you can offer a product that will be valuable to them. So I mean,
Mhm.
that's another huge pro is the acceptance to communicate and the ability to suggestively sell product.
Yeah, that data that you get from building that customer profile, we see so many businesses that pay for such data. So to be able to set up a system where you're gathering that for yourself, yeah, that's obviously huge.
Mhm.
Now, on the flip side of that, there are some negative aspects of subscriptions if you're a business. So obviously the risk of chargebacks. We do see what's referred to as subscription fatigue, where sometimes these customers will forget that they have a subscription, or they just sort of stop using it. They found it beneficial at one point during the year. Maybe they signed up during the holiday season because there was something going on, but then it doesn't really pertain to them. So instead of reaching out to you directly, they call the bank. And in fact, we saw from our cardholder survey that we did earlier this year, we saw that about 90% of cardholders would prefer that their bank be able to cancel subscriptions for them. So, I
Mhm.
mean, one, that tells you, that it's pretty common that chargebacks are being filed for subscriptions, but also how comfortable cardholders are with disputing subscriptions with their bank. They wish that their bank could go ahead and cancel that subscription for them. So, especially if you're offering that kind of subscription-based service, that's something to definitely keep in mind about how cardholders see that in terms of wanting to cancel their subscription. They're running straight to their bank. So being upfront about sort of those billing cycles, when those subscriptions renew, those sort of things, you definitely want to have that communication be consistent and be clear. So that way they're coming to you if they do want to cancel rather than go to their bank. We do see payment failures. Some subscription models, they depend on those recurring payments. But credit cards do decline sometimes. They either deactivate their card because they do have a few subscriptions on there, and rather than calling each merchant, they just cancel the card and have that taken off. That can disrupt cash flow. It can require companies to implement some payment retry systems or go with a third party for that. So it does take time, resources, money to kind of go after those failed payments, especially if it's one where that customer does want to continue with the subscription, they just happen to cancel their card. That and prorated refund. So a lot of times that we see is if a consumer does want to cancel their subscription, sometimes they wait till maybe the week before it renews, where they get sort of the 3 weeks that they have, and then they sometimes they'll either file a chargeback or even contact the service provider and say, I'd like a refund. Haven't used it this week, where they might have had 3 weeks to use that product. So just partially using that's money out of the merchant pocket. So, being able to avoid that at all costs, that's something that merchants offering subscriptions should look into.
Right. And something else that I think is super important is maybe notifying your consumer that this purchase is going to be, or this is going to be transacted a week before, for two reasons. One, they know it's coming. So if they need to cancel the subscriptions, at least you're notifying them. Rather have a subscription canceled than a chargeback ensue. And then the second one is, what if the customer's card is actually been compromised from somewhere else, but they wanted to continue to have your subscription as an offering. They still want to do business with you. So you notifying them a week and a half in advance will give them time to perhaps say, oh, this card was compromised, let me put in a new product. Because getting that subscription back is going to be a lot harder. So communication, it's very effective. And I think doing that will alleviate a lot of stress and also retain a lot of business.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. Communication is key here, especially if if it's something where you sell a product that automatically enrolls them into a subscription services. We see that sometimes. You want to be as clear as possible that of what the cardholder is getting into.
Right.
All right, that's us to the end of our webinar. So thank you for everyone who stuck around. We're gonna go ahead and tackle some questions here real quick. Some that we had gotten submitted beforehand. So we'll dive into those here really quickly. And we're gonna have some portions of it that are going to be on our podcast version. I'll tell you a little bit about that here at the end. But first, Kellen, let's dive into some of these submitted questions really quick.
Great.
The first one we have, they ask, what are best practices for protecting businesses from friendly fraud while also protecting customer experience? That's the tightrope that merchants who have chargeback prevention and management process in place. That's the tightrope that they walk. How do you put up enough restrictions while not putting up too much friction? It's a balance that's it's different for each merchant depending on the product that they sell, their transaction volume, and everything like that. But we went over best practices a little bit, but mainly I think the biggest thing that we can suggest is again those chargeback alerts, letting you know what is coming down the pike in terms of if there's a dispute that has arisen that hasn't turned into a chargeback already. Being able to head that off at the pass before it causes damage to your merchant account or reputational damage. Being able to solve a cardholder's dispute, especially if it's something on the side of merchant error, that's something that you want to be able to do, and to be able to have those safeguards in place to not disrupt customer experience as well. That's why we kind of touched on digital wallets and tokenization. That's something that already comes with its own protection features, to where you don't have to put up you don't have to put up additional safeguards that those digital wallets already have in place. So you're not setting up more friction. You're avoiding cart abandonment at checkout, those sorts of things like that. And the other thing that we would recommend is responding to all chargebacks, even if it's one that's valid, it's, it was merchant error, being able to take a look at those chargebacks and responding to them. There are, chargebacks are a burden, but there is blessings in them that you can take a look at. That data has a lot of key information, either if it's a policy that's being taken advantage of that you have in your system, that's something that you can shore up. If it's something to do with your customer service, if it's not being as responsive as it needs to be, and that's the sort of feedback you're getting. Chargeback data has its weight in gold as far as optimizing your business and finding out where to shore up those leaks in revenue, if you will.
Yeah, it goes a long way with your processor as well. If they see that you're actively
Yes.
engaged in managing those chargebacks, they feel a lot more comfortable with your business model. So you'll have a little bit more runway, and you'd be surprised. You could get quite a bit reversed. On top of that, like we talked about earlier, communication, transparency policies, just making sure all your terms and conditions are there, your billing descriptors are up, and just ensure that you have a favorable or fair return policy in case it ever gets down to that. But technology and customer service really go all hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, definitely communicate with your customers. I mean, whether it's tracking or following up with them on their satisfaction, it's something that can help out a lot. And also your payment processor, they're going to have more knowledge on what's happening, definitely on the regulatory side, or what's going on with the card networks. There's updates every day. The industry is it's moving. It might be slowly, but it's moving to recognize that friendly fraud and illegitimate chargebacks are a big issue, and they are working to sort of balance the scales a little bit. So your payment processor can have sort of those updates and those key insights of what can be submitted, what you have to use to your advantage. So that's a great point, Kellen. All right, next question we have is, how do I win no-show chargebacks? I think this is coming from someone in the hotel and lodging industry. So I think this goes back to, and I'll pass this over to you, Kellen, but I think this goes back to communication. You want to be up front with your terms and conditions at checkout, and also in the email that gets sent to those patrons that are visiting your establishment, that that confirmation email that also lists out what your parameters are for, if there's a no-show charge that you have, if somebody booked a hotel, didn't show up, you charge them that no-show fee and they charge that back. You want to have clear and concise language around what those no-show fees are, and that can be used to submit as compelling evidence to overturn that, saying, hey, this language was very apparent. This cardholder knew that this was part of the transaction whenever they completed it.
Right. Like, we staff up based on reservations, right? You could be adding 25% to your overhead just because you have quite a bit of people that are booking at your hotel or booking, for the plane or for the restaurant. So just like with subscriptions, it's really important to, send a reminder a week before, talk about your, have a clear cancellation and no-show policy that they agree to. And, the reminders are the really big thing, but, having that compelling evidence will go a long way with the chargebacks. I mean, there's a lot, people usually book very far in advance. So, a lot of things can happen. So keeping them in the loop of what's going on is extremely important. Maybe having a cancellation policy where, if you're booking so far out, a full refund after 3 months, and then it goes down from there. But it goes to reminders, communication, customer service.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next question that we have, and this will probably be our last one, so we can let everybody get back to their day. But this last question that we have says, if we don't receive any update from the bank after defending the chargeback, can we take it as a win? No. Until you get confirmation from the bank saying that the chargeback was ruled in your favor, you can't necessarily take that as a win. You got to keep in mind the time frames that they give merchants to submit their evidence. That there's the cardholder has more time to submit that. So there is that back and forth of here's the evidence that was submitted by the merchant, and then that goes back to the cardholder and the issuing bank. So no response from the bank is not a telltale sign that you have won that chargeback. Definitely want to stay up to date on that decision. Reach out to the issuing bank if you need to. Get with your payment processor on that if you have a question or if it's been a little while. But also, make yourself privy to what those timelines are for the different card networks on what those turnaround times are.
Yeah, you just got to stay proactive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Kellen, thank you so much for coming on. We've worked with you guys for a while, and you guys are very trusted. So I'm really glad from getting the payment processor's perspective on some of these things that we dove into. I'm really glad we had you guys on board. Really insightful. I mean, we're kind of situated in between really everybody in the payment process. So anytime we can get somebody who's working as closely with merchants as you guys are, it really is insightful and really helps out a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're excited to be a part of it. It's an exciting time. I mean, being prepared for the holidays, you have all this excitement about, the increase in transactions, everyone's making good spends. It's important to be prepared. And I think education goes a long way, and having great partners like yourselves is, it helps everything. Right? I always say rising tides lifts all boats. So
That's right.
Yeah.
We'll definitely look to have you on again in the future.
I'd love to. Absolutely.
Yeah, just a reminder for those still on, this webinar was recorded, and we'll have a link to that at some point in the next day or so. That can be shared with colleagues, or if there was something that we went over that you kind of want to check out again, see what we had to say about it, you can always rewatch it yourselves. After about 30 days, we'll have this webinar available on our podcast as well, and that's Charge Forward with Chargebacks911. That's available on all streaming platforms. And we'll let you know after 30 days where you can find that as well. Take a look at the podcast version. We're going to dive into a few more questions. We're going to have a little bit more information on what we went over. So it's a little bit more in depth, a little bit more conversational. So make sure to check out Charge Forward with Chargebacks911. But again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a great week, great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, guys.